That CPD Show. Welcome back to That CPD Show, and today I'm joined by Pastor Martin Storey. Martin has been leading CLM in Coventry along with his wife Esther since 2012. Martin is passionate about serving Jesus, being full of the Holy Spirit, seeing lives totally transformed by the gospel, the presence of God, seeing the church be all she can be, and longs to be part of a move of God in the nation. Married in 1997, Martin and Esther have 3 grown-up children. Martin, welcome to the show. It's great to have you.
Chris, great to be on the show. Thank you very much for having me. Good to be here.
Brilliant. And it's also worth saying that for long-time listeners of the show, Esther has also done a podcast with me, and it was a great show. So if you haven't listened to it, make sure you listen, because it's an excellent podcast.
She's all right. She's all right. She's a well put together kid.
Excellent.
Keeps me on the straight and narrow.
Absolutely. Well, today, what we're going to do is we've got 3 resources that we're going to talk about, and you've got 3 with you. But this is a show where we don't just talk about development; we also talk about dessert as well. So we're going to start with your favorite dessert. What is your favorite dessert?
Yeah, my favorite dessert is chocolate mousse. Simple as that. A good chocolate mousse doesn't need to be too big, but a well put together, simple. I don't need any add-ons. You can stick a raspberry or a strawberry on the top if you want, but I'm going to eat that to get out the way and just enjoy a little good chocolate pot or chocolate mousse. That's like, if that's on a menu of desserts. I know there's a lot of people here passionate about sticky toffee pudding and banoffee pie and apple crumble and custard. I'm never going to go there. For me, just if chocolate mousse is on the menu, it's a no-brainer.
It's a good dessert because I think it falls into the sort of the light category of desserts, which after, if you're at a restaurant, 3-course meal, what do you want? By the time you get to dessert, I'm normally completely full. And so I'm really sort of trying to make room for some kind of, to try and get something sweet in. And so something like a chocolate dessert really works quite well for that, doesn't it?
Well, I think, again, so maybe this is the wrong show, the wrong focus for me. Because if you do like those two course options.
Oh yeah.
I would actually be a starter and a main guy. So, and I know, like Esther, my wife, she's a pudding person. So she will always start with the end in mind. She'll look at the pudding and she'll choose her main, really depending on what's on the pudding menu. For me, I'm just good with something sweet at the end of the meal. I don't need a big bowl of pudding and custard a little sweet taste, perfect for me.
Yeah, I mean, I am also a big fan of starters. I wish maybe in another podcast I'm going to talk about your favorite starter.
It's not quite so poignant, is it? I think
no, it doesn't have that same ring to it, does it? To talk about starters, or as much as I love starters, this is a podcast where we're passionate about dessert. I think chocolate mousse is a really good shout. Actually, I think it's light, it's good. It's not fussy. It's not trying to be anything it's not, but it's a good solid one. And it's also one of those ones where you can have, you can get one of those kind of little mousse pots from the supermarket, good midweek. It's a good everyday staple as well. So you can get something. So it's got
a good everyday dessert. Yeah, I don't do it every day, but maybe I could. Yeah.
I think this is the difference between you and I clearly need to stop eating desserts. I think that's my my issue here. No, that's brilliant. Chocolate mousse, excellent choice. I think that's great. Brilliant. All right, we're going to move on and we're going to talk about the resources that you brought with you today. You got 3 with you. Should we dive into your first resource? What's the first development resource that you brought with you?
Yeah, the first development resource is a book that is very dear to my heart, and it's The Pursuit of God by A.W. Tozer. And I think something probably, because I toyed with this, wrestled a little bit coming on this show with you, Chris, as to what resources to talk about and what to bring. And the reason is that the vast majority of the books that I read, the things that I listen to, are really around fueling my own fire and my own passion for God. I think the truth is that probably in terms of wrestling with organizational leadership and upskilling and lots of those things, I'm an external processor. I love to engage with people, love to talk. The way I tend to go about things is I'll try and get my head around some things. I'll talk with others. And if I need expertise, I'll try and hunt somebody down and respectfully see if I can grab 30 minutes on a Zoom and have some well-crafted questions. And so I'm not the best reader of leadership materials, but and I will bring some different books. 2 and 3 are different, but really, because I just don't want to bring the same type of stuff. But really, The Pursuit of God by Tozer, for me, it's representative of a genre of what I probably would call rocket fuel. And this is where I go. And this is what I try and put into my system. And The Pursuit of God is a fire fueler. It's a challenging book. It's a little book, but don't be deceived for those if you reach for it. It's a bit like reading Ephesians. You can whiz through it in 6 chapters, but if you really want to get into it, it's going to demand your attention. And The Pursuit of God is a little bit like that, if I'm honest. It's not in that sense an easy read, but it's a beautiful read and it's a powerful read, and it inspired me and it undid me, and it's a book that I've gone back to time and time again. It goes after the heart, and it is what it says. It's really around a book around provoking us to run hard after God himself. And yeah, so that's my first resource, The Pursuit of God, A.W. Tozer, written 1948. And yeah, it's precious to me because it does something to my heart.
Well, firstly, I mean, any book written in the 40s, I always find good. I mean, I'm a big C.S. Lewis fan, so really likes, Mere Christianity. That was written in the 40s as well. Something written at that sort of time just seems to capture me a little bit. But it's and this is one of those books that's actually sat on my bedside table as nighttime reading. And we said before the podcast started recording, it's probably not nighttime reading.
It's not a bedtime read.
So to dive into a little bit of some of the aspects that he touches on, maybe some things that have really stood out to you from the book.
Yeah, great. I mean, really just in the preface, and I remember when I very first picked this up, I'd heard a lot of people talk about it. I think I got a copy, a little bit like you. It probably sat on my bedside for a little while, and then I entered into a week of prayer and fasting or something like that, and I thought, okay, I'm going to read this during. In fact, it was the first time I did 21-day fast, and I thought I'll read this in the first couple of days, and it was actually it was a guide for me through the whole of those 3 weeks. And the preface begins like this. If I can read a shortish quote.
Go for it.
And this is 1948. This is Chicago. He says, in this hour of all but universal darkness, one cheering gleam appears. Within the fold of conservative Christianity, there are to be found increasing numbers of persons whose religious lives are marked by a growing hunger after God himself. They're eager for spiritual realities, will not be put off with words. They're athirst for God, will not be satisfied until they've drunk deep at the fountain of living water. And he says, this is the only real harbinger of revival I've been able to detect anywhere on the religious horizon. It may be the cloud the size of a man's hand, for which a few saints here or there have been looking. It can result in a resurrection of life for many souls and a recapture of that radiant wonder that should accompany faith in Christ, but the wonder that has all but fled the Church of God in our day. And it really is speaking about how, as believers, we should go after God himself, and he delights to be found by us, but we have to be seekers. The idea of a seeker, and I think it's interesting because the language of seeker sensitive church that rose up, I don't know accurately, 80s, 90s, this idea that a seeker is somebody who hasn't yet come to faith in Christ. But once you've come to faith in Christ, you're no longer a seeker. And the posture of the book is we must continue to be seekers all of our days, seeking after God, making time for him, making space for him, pursuing him, getting rid of the obstacles. He finishes the preface saying this, Others have gone before me much further into these mysteries than I have. But if my fire is not large, it is yet real, and there may be those who can light their candle at its flame. And the reality is, like Tozer's fire, you know, he says it's not large. I think it was large. You know, legend has it, I don't know if it's true, legend has it he wrote this book on his knees. He was a man passionate for God. And I have lit my candle at the flame of this book many times. It has done something to my heart. It goes after the heart. It's challenging. It looks at well, I mean, chapter 1 is following hard after God. Chapter 2 is the blessedness of possessing nothing. And it really goes after the perils of materialism, and it challenges the heart. And every chapter finishes with a prayer. And you know, he finishes this first chapter saying, "Oh God, I have tasted your goodness, and it has both satisfied me and made me thirsty for more. I'm painfully conscious of my need for further grace and ashamed of my lack of desire. Oh God, I want you. I long to be filled with longing. I thirst to be made more thirsty still. Show me your glory." And he says, begin in mercy, a new work of love within me. I say to my soul, rise up, my love, my fair one, come away. Then give me grace to rise up and follow you from this misty lowland where I have wandered so long. And, you know, they're not quick prayers, but I found it very helpful to engage with them. And I don't know, Chris, you know, the popularity of messages of, you know, finding your purpose, being blessed. I need somebody to speak to my heart, to challenge me on the things that creep in, to really challenge me about my apathy and my coldness. And yet I don't find any hint of condemnation in this book. It's a book that is just urging the saints on to go after God, to love God, to live for God, and to enjoy the beauty of a deep relationship with him. And so yeah, that's the tone of the book. And yeah, my recommendation, anybody who hasn't read it, is to read it. But it's not like every book. It's a book that needs a bit of time. Even some of the language, it needs a little bit of focus, as some of these older writings tend to do. Somebody once said to me, Tozer is hard. Tozer's hard. It's like, well, yeah, a little bit. But if you're willing to get through that, the truth and the purity of the message is a message I think we need desperately and deeply. Yeah.
Fantastic. I resonate with that completely, actually. You know, I think in the modern Western Christianity, it can sometimes lean slightly, especially in the more contemporary churches, and your church, my church, we fall into those kind of contemporary churches. We can, if we're not careful, we can go towards a little bit of where we're not pursuing God, we're kind of pursuing a better life, like you said. And I think that reorienting ourselves continuously to the pursuit of God, I think, is so important. You know, we talk a lot about on this podcast about, you know, leadership books and organizational leadership, all those kind of things. And your next two books will be on that. But before you get to that point, is why do we do all of that stuff? If it's not because we're trying to pursue God and help people to pursue God through our organizational leadership, we're missing the point. And so
yeah. No, sorry, Chris.
And so I think that a book like this is so helpful. It's almost one of those kind of like great. It's got to be the starting point. It's getting you back to that almost a kind of a plumb line, as it were. That everything you do from then on, you know, any development activity, it has to be with that viewpoint that it's helping yourself pursue after God, or helping other people pursue after God.
Yeah, and I think for me this is a really, really important thing to express, which is I believe that as a Christian leader, I mean, first and foremost, I'm a disciple, I'm a follower, but I found myself positioned and called into a role of leadership. And my personal passion, my fervor the example of my life, the depth of my prayer. I passionately believe these things are the most important things for me. That if I'm going to be a leader of a spiritual community in that sense, my ability in organizational leadership, it's not that I don't think these things have value, they have great value. But of first importance is my own love for God and my own walk with God. And this is why, as I say, they actually, if you were to look at my bookshelves, they're littered with biographies. These are the things that I read and I reread, I go back to, and books that have stirred my heart, I'll read them again and again and come back to them. And I think at the heart of leadership and leadership development, we have to attend to our own fire. Nobody can do that for me. And so like Paul writes, Romans 12, never be lacking in zeal, but keep your spiritual fervor, serving the Lord. And I have to attend to my own fervor and my own passion. And that's why this book and books like it are top of my reading list, because I need that input. I need that provocation. I need that challenge. And reading biographies and reading from others whose passion is great, whose sacrifice has been great. I've got Fox's Book of Martyrs, which is another not an easy read, but that's one of my bedtime books. And the reason I read books like that is because other people's life and sacrifice and surrender, it challenges my heart, and it draws me into a place where I want to be, and I need to be, and I need to keep myself. And I think this is a really, really important part of leadership and Christian leadership in our day, that as leaders, we are of first importance attending to our own fire, our own passion for God, our own prayerfulness, our own holiness, our own humility, our own pursuit of God. And so, yeah, my resources tend to gravitate around that. And this is just a great example of that.
Fantastic. Well, that is The Pursuit of God by A.W. Tozer, a classic book, definitely recommended. Should we move on to your second resource? What's the second one you brought with you today?
Yes, second book is completely different. And this is a book called The Advantage. And the strapline for it is Why Organizational Health Trumps Everything Else in Business, although it's not really about business alone. It's about organizational health. It's by Patrick Lencioni, that many people will be familiar with through numbers of his leadership and business writings, most notably, I think, 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. But this book, The Advantage, Organizational Health, a lot of it is around creating clarity. And the reason I've brought this, Chris, is this has helped us massively in a local church leadership context. And it was a blueprint for us in us grappling with language and what many churches might call vision and values. We don't actually call it vision and values at CLM, our church, really because of this book. But it was a roadmap for us. And Patrick Lencioni was a consultant to us as a leadership through this book, and the way that it's written, it can be a great guide. And so, this is why I've brought this to the table. We've been, as you said in the introduction, we've been leading the church where we are, Assemblies of God Church in Coventry, for 12 years. And I would say probably a couple of years in or something like that, we took seriously articulating where we were headed and what our values were and what our strategic anchors were. And this book helped us to know how to go about that. I mean, where do you start? And it's absolutely brilliant. He's a brilliant writer. It's incredibly accessible. So that's the book. That's the book, The Advantage. I know you've read it too, so
yes,
we'll talk about it maybe.
Yeah, I have. I would say for anyone that's a Patrick Lencioni fan, or has maybe not dived into any of his books before, The Advantage is almost kind of like the the concentrated teaching parts of all his other books, really. So all that you get from all the other ones, a lot of them are more sort of fable style, and this one is straight sort of teaching, as it were. And I think there's some really excellent stuff in there. You mentioned one of them, which was strategic anchors. To unpack that little idea to to anyone that's listening, because it's maybe a term that maybe people haven't come across before, and I think it's indicative of what he brings out for the reader in his book.
Yeah. He talks about 4 disciplines in the book, and these are kind of the big main chapter or sections. Discipline 1, build a cohesive leadership team. Discipline 2, create clarity. Discipline 3, over communicate clarity. Discipline 4, reinforce clarity. So you see, like a lot of this is around clarity, and he asks a number of questions within chapter 2, creating clarity. 6 questions in particular, which are: why do we exist? How do we behave? What do we do? How will we succeed? What is most important right now, and what must we do? And question 4, how will we succeed? This brings in the term strategic anchors, and really it's around, if we grapple with question 1, which is why do we exist? What's our purpose? Which for all of us, if we're grappling with things like mission statements, vision statements, what are we on with? I think why do we exist really is that big picture theological conviction about what the church is. What are we on with? What are we trying to do? What are we on the planet for? What are we getting out of bed for? And it's big picture, it's out there. But then he works through this and gets to, and some of it's a process of not getting to there next, but having to get some other things down on the flip chart or on the table to then get to question 4, which is how are we going to succeed? If we are called to be this, if this is our purpose, this is our raison d'etre, how will we succeed? How will we do it? And it's a process where he helps you think through your plan, your strategic, the 2 or 3 or at the most 4 things that really are going to be the things that you're focused on having to do that really deliver everything else. And so for us, it was really helpful. That's what he means by strategic anchors, and your plan, your focus, and for us, walking through this, it's just such a brilliant tool, because he really unpacks what to do, why to do it, and then how to do it with examples. So for instance, when you get to the question of how will you succeed, he's walking you through literally a process of how do you figure out how you will succeed? How do you figure out what your strategic anchors are or need to be? And he gives lots of examples, and there are drawings and illustrations of how you might go about it. And it literally became a roadmap for us and helped us to distill, because what you find is there's so many things we believe in passionately and we should do. And to try and distill down to just 2 or 3 statements is very, very difficult. We're not as the church, we're not a business selling socks. We're actually the kingdom, the church. It's so multifaceted. So how on earth do you begin to draw down and go, what should we be focusing on primarily? What are the 2, 3 really big ticket items that actually underpin everything else? And his processing and the simplicity of how he describes it really enabled us, certainly as a team. We read this before coming to the table, then we had 3 away days, and really through this process, this book held our hand, if you like, through the process of us being able to say, okay, this is why we believe we exist. And then getting to that place of these are our 3 strategic anchors. And so for us over the last 10 years, they have really underpinned our activity. They've underpinned the posture of our ministries. They've spoken into our recruitment processes and the building of staff team, because we understand what we're trying to do in order to achieve why we believe we've been put on the planet. And I can't begin to describe how important that has been. So yeah, that's strategic anchors. One other thing that would be worth saying is and if anyone picked this up, if they haven't, he talks about perfection paralysis, which for me was also really, really important, because I was putting off articulating vision and values because I wasn't sure we were going to get it quite right. And I didn't want to say something to the church or, put something on the wall and feel like it wasn't quite right. And he talks about the perils of avoiding getting something down and making a start. It's not that you can't refine it later, but if you don't help people understand your behavioral values or what you're trying to do, what's important, then everybody's going to be trying to interpret what they think is important or how they think they should behave. And he quotes General Patton saying, a good plan violently executed today is better than a perfect plan executed next week. And he talks about organizations failing to articulate who they are and what they're on with and how to behave because they're scared of getting it not perfect. And in the meantime, it's chaos, and everybody's trying to do their best, but they've all got their own filter and their own background. So that was really helpful for me. Yeah. Go on.
Well, and it's what I'm saying. I've been able to help churches work out those kind of things like mission statements and values, and every single time I've done this, I've helped them. You have to get to a point where you've thought of all the ideas, you've thought of all the options. Everyone in the team is exhausted because they've thought of so many ideas, and we've narrowed it down, and you get to the point where you've got this kind of one statement left, and you think this is the one, but everyone has that doubt of going, oh, I don't think it's quite perfect. And once every church gets to that point, no statement is perfect. And what I found is that when church leaders take the step to actually take that forward, even when it's 99.5% correct, but it's still that 0.5% missing. But if you take that one forward, or even 90% right, but you take that statement and you take it forward today, what you find is, I found every single time, is that the church starts to live in it, and they start to recognize, actually, oh, this is a lot better than I first thought. And so but what can happen is the church leaders, you can wait and go, no, I'm going to wait for the perfect statement, or I'm going to wait for the perfect plan, or but actually there is no perfect statement and perfect plan. The only thing you've got is you've got the best possible that you can work with, that you feel like you've prayed about it, you feel like the Holy Spirit's working through you, you've worked with a team as well, and you've got it all together, and then you've just got to move forward with it. And as soon as you move forward with it, it gets a kind of a new life, is what I've seen, and it just seems to work. And so just the encouragement there. I think you're absolutely right, that church, if you're working through this book, you're never going to get it perfect, a mission statement, values, strategic anchors, but you are going to get it about 90% of the way, and have the courage to move forward with the 90%. I think is definitely worth saying.
Definitely. And it definitely, for us, it's brought cohesion, it's brought alignment, it's brought clarity. And as you say, it's not perfect. Although I've got to say, through the process of this book, and I think without it, I think we would really have struggled. But through the simplicity and the clarity of what he brings there, we did start to feel like the fog started to lift, through the processing of going, okay. Now, we knew we believed in that, but that really makes sense. This is important. This is why intuitively we felt this was important. This is underpinning everything else. And so it started to help the fog to clear. There's a really interesting section in there around values as well, and something that I've not come across elsewhere. I'm sure there's lots of material where they would, but really him making the distinction between aspirational values, permission to play. So aspirational values being the things we'd like to be, but we're not yet. Permission to play values, which really don't put those down. Like, if, as a church, believe in the Bible, believe in prayer, generosity, integrity, is kind of saying, look, you shouldn't be a church if you don't believe in those things. That, they just acknowledge that their permission to play. Well, you can put them down if you want, but they're not who you are. And accidental values, like, oh gosh, we look around, everybody's wearing Nike in our organization. It's like, it's kind of there. It's our behavior, but we didn't set out for that. Adidas is fine. But then he talks about your core values, your deep personality, the 2 or 3 behavioral traits that make you different. And I think that for us was really, really helpful to say, okay, these are permission to play values, these are aspirational values, but what are we extreme on compared to others, and delighted to be a little bit extreme on those things. We realize, and for us, I give you an example, for us, one of our core values, we have 3 core values, one of our core values through this process for us as a church was a passion for the presence of God. And it's interesting because we had a young lady when we first came to the church. She was a doctor, one of the few professionals in the church at the time. And she came to me and Esther and said, you guys, you're always going on about the presence of God. I don't get it. And we were like, yeah, it's brilliant, isn't it? And we were like, no, but you talk about it too much. We're like, whoa, we haven't even started. This is going to get worse. And actually, we ended up with, not joking, we ended up helping her find another church because she just didn't resonate. And we're like, look, this is a hill to die on for us. And so it's really who we are. And I think, again, the processing helped us to strip away what's aspirational, what's permission to play, and what's core, what's right at the heart of our organization that maybe it makes us distinct from other great churches, but they're going to have different distinctives. So yeah, brilliant book, helping you understand how to go about articulating well.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah, that's The Advantage by Patrick Lencioni. A great book. Really recommended that one. Should we move on to your final resource? What's the final one you brought with you?
Sure. Yeah, number 3 is I've brought it and listed it as Strengthsfinder 2.0 by Tom Rath. But it actually it's a rework and a development from an original book called Now Discover Your Strengths, which was by Marcus Buckingham and Donald Clifton. But they all come out of the Gallup stable. It's a Gallup book. And it's Strengthsfinder 2.0. If you want to get it, you can't now Discover Your Strengths, but it's the same idea. It's just a bit of a rework. It's an improvement on the original. An extraordinary book. And I'm sure many people will have come across it, will have read it. It's along with numbers of tools that help with self-awareness and self-discovery, personality indicators, the likes of Myers-Briggs, Enneagram, DISC. I know there's lots of things out there. For me, this is a really great tool, and a really great tool to not only do personally, but to do with team. If people have got leaders with them, they've got other people in ministry, to understand one another's strengths and gifts. So just to give the premise of Strengthsfinder 2.0, Gallup, and this blows me away, Chris, but behind this book is 30 years of research and interviews with in excess of 2 million people on the planet from every walk of life. I mean, that's more than a sample. So that work, Gallup did this piece of work. I think the book was first released at the early 2000s, Now Discover Your Strengths, which has, as I say, has evolved and developed into Strengthsfinder 2.0. But what they discovered or unearthed or articulated through these 2 million interviews was 34 universal strengths, as they call them, 34 most prevalent themes of human talent, and really giving language to these strengths. They ended up settling on 34 from all the people, like speaking to brilliant teachers, brilliant doctors, brilliant sports people, brilliant stay-at-home moms, but just brilliant people in every walk of life, and saying we found there were these themes. We found 34 of them. They just kept on recurring. And the idea as well, and I'm not sure how much this would translate in the church, but if people are listening who are work in the marketplace, there's so many organizations. And I worked for a global company for a period of time, and this was true for them, where they orientate and recruit around a number of core behavioral values and would set personal development plan and personal development budget against bringing people's weaknesses kind of up to a standard. And this proposition is saying, but no one's going to be remembered for their weaknesses. Everyone's going to remember for their strengths. What you bring to the table is your strengths. What if, and this was our initial proposition, what if organizations identified where people were strong and helped them nurture those strengths to become towering strengths, and actually that could contribute the best that they can. And if you get Strengthsfinder 2.0, it will give you an access code to go online to take a test, which will then spit out for you your top 5 strengths from this list of 34 in order. And then there's a chapter or so around each of the strengths and what they mean. And there's a load of resources actually that link to this and how you can help and manage and develop teams around Strengthsfinder. But I found it an incredibly helpful tool. And I'll just say this, that number one, for understanding myself. And it was a time in ministry where I began to understand myself better. And frankly, I needed to, so that I didn't have a car crash, and also so that I would annoy people a little bit less. And so the journey of self-awareness and the journey into self-regulation, it was a very, very helpful tool for me. And it was also an incredibly helpful tool as we rolled it out with team, which we've done here, of understanding other people and understanding their strengths. And it gave language. I'll just give one example of when we first did this in the church. I was a part of a leadership team prior to coming to Coventry. We rolled this out, and there was one guy in our leadership team. He was the finance director, and he had a real knack for pouring cold water on ideas. And we'd come up with all these exciting ideas, things we could do for God, how we could change the world. And it's almost like this natural response was why it wouldn't work. And I thought this guy had a positivity and a faith issue until we did Strengthsfinder. And then his number one strength came out as this strength. And some of the language is interesting within Strengthsfinder, but his number one strength was something called deliberative, which is a strength around understanding risk and perceiving risk and looking how to mitigate risk. And it just opened my eyes, Chris, because I ended up getting my full 34 in order, and deliberative is quite low down on my list. And I just, rather than seeing this guy as faithless or negative, I just opened my eyes. And maybe this is really obvious for other people, but for me, it was like an epiphany of going, this guy is a gift. We need him at this table. And and I ended up then going to him like with that when I got ideas and saying, hey, would you just shine your light on this? What do you think's wrong with this? Why might this fall out of bed? Because actually he was brilliant. He could do that straight away. And it didn't mean we wouldn't do it, but it mean that we would end up doing it well. Or if it was a bad idea, maybe he'd help us see that it wasn't the best thing. So yeah, good. Amazing tool.
Brilliant. I would love to find out what are your top strengths. I think everyone listening to this is thinking, what's Martin's top strengths? So yeah, what are your top ones?
Okay, so my top 5 in order come out of this test, and let me say that as communication, focus, achiever, maximizer, and responsibility. And some of those kind of speak for themselves, but some of the language, as I say, like deliberative, you wouldn't necessarily understand what that meant. But those, if you've done the book, if you know the strength, those are my 5.
Yeah, I've just found my 5. I've got the access to Gallup. Mine are strategic, ideation, futuristic, input, and achiever.
Wow.
So yeah, it was great to find that out though, because doing those things, I've had a bit of coaching around it as well, and all of those strengths, they are. I remember getting some coaching on it by Strengthsfinder coaches. and they would say that these are talents, but you have to put them to work to become a
Yeah.
real strength, and you have to work on them. And so that was really helpful for me, that I have these talents, and everyone's got talents. And what's the great thing
Yeah.
about Strengthsfinder is that no talent is better than another talent.
That's right.
They're just, and everyone's got them. So, whenever you think, oh, I'm not sure I feel like I've got much of a talent, you do. That's the great news.
Yeah.
But you have to put them to work. So yeah, it's a really interesting just to see. And I think interesting to see how they work together as well. That's what I really like.
Yeah, and I think for us from a team point of view, and if the work people do this across team like you guys have, we just really helped us to see, a number of the strengths are around creativity and like you, so ideation, futuristic. Gosh, you're going to be a brilliant guy to be kind of dreaming forward, and so for us, we'll think, okay, in some of these meetings, we need Chris in this meeting because okay, maybe he's not directly responsible for the youth ministry right now, but in this meeting, we want to dream about the next 10 years for youth. So let's bring Chris into that meeting because he's going to be great around this, just out of the way he's wired. I mean, another thing can be, and I needed some coaching for this, but is understanding the combination of your strengths as well. And interestingly, a bit similar to you, there was a lady who she back in the early 2000s, she had the franchise to coach Strengthsfinder in the UK. And it was interesting because I actually highlighted this it was a similar setting to this in a way in our church. And there was a guy who had a senior role in an organization, and he ended up running with this ball and investing something like £30,000 of personal development money into Strengthsfinder. And so this lady comes to him, and she, she's got this big contract now and she said, how did you come across this? And he said, oh, there's this guy at my church. So I ended up meeting her, and she sat down and helped me. And when I told her my 5, she said, oh dear. She said, you are going to have to learn to say no. And I was like, why is that? And she started to talk to me about how my strengths would interplay, and to go unchecked would tend towards workaholism. And it was just, again, really, really helpful of going, okay, I'm wired in a way that if by the grace of God, I can use these strengths and contribute them well to the body of Christ and to others, wonderful. But I also need to understand that they could be a danger to me if I don't understand them properly. So again, just that whole journey of self-awareness and how to run a good race over the long haul, this helped me a lot.
Fantastic. Brilliant. Well, that's Strengthsfinder 2.0. It's by Tom Rath, but you can also do the test as well online. Definitely worth doing. I think any church leader, any minister listening to this, definitely do Strengthsfinder if you haven't done it already. Martin, thank you so much for joining me today. It's been really great. 3 excellent resources. We've got the Pursuit of God by A.W. Tozer, The Advantage by Patrick Lencioni, and Strengthsfinder 2.0 by Tom Rath, all of course enjoyed with a lovely chocolate mousse. And
Yes.
Thank you so much for taking the time. And it's been great to have you on. Thank you so much.
Chris, thank you, and thank you for what you're doing. I kind of just say how much I have enjoyed listening to others and learning from them. And so thank you for all you're doing here and drawing things out of others to resource hundreds, thousands of people around the world. And I am a beneficiary. So thank you, and keep up the great work. It's been a blessing to be here.
Brilliant. Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to this episode of That CPD Show. For more episodes, why not subscribe and give us a review? It really helps us out. See you next time.